Welcome to part 3 of leading small groups. Now, in session 1, we talked about what are you teaching? What's your curriculum? How do you choose it? In part 2, we talked about who is teaching what? What's your structure? What are your volunteers, your facilities, your church pattern? What's going to work best for you? Now, in session 3, we're finally making it to your classroom itself. Aren't you glad? We're finally getting to your classroom, and in this session, we're going to talk about your classroom atmosphere. Now, your atmosphere is determined and evaluated mainly by your senses. So, for instance, if you want to know what your classroom looks like on a child's level, what does he see, then simply enter it the same way that he does. What door does he walk through? How tall is he? You might have to get on your knees, come into your classroom, and you might notice as you look around on his level, now we're talking about the senses here, what does he see? Are the posters too high? The rules, the different things you have posted, the Bible timeline or the Bible story pictures, are they hung on an adult level or are they hung eye level to him? What does he see? Is this a welcoming room? Is it neat? Is it organized? Is it clear where to go? Is it clear where he can sit? Is it confusing? What does he see? Now, what does he hear as he walks in? What does he hear? Is there music playing? What sets the atmosphere? Now, he's also going to hear voices. He's going to hear other kids. He's also going to hear adults. What are the adults saying? What's their tone of voice? What is he hearing? So what does he see? What does he hear? What does he even smell? As you come into your classroom, is there a pleasing aroma? Now, that may seem kind of silly, but I've been in some churches where you walk into some of the rooms in the children's ministry, and it's a very musty smell, almost a moldy smell. And it's not a smell that's very welcoming. And so what does he smell? Sometimes we'll use popcorn. We'll cook popcorn because with kids, they go to the movies, they smell popcorn. Usually popcorn is equated with excitement, with something fun. So they walk in and there's that familiar smell. And it sets a mood, it sets an atmosphere, a tone. Chocolate does the same. The smell of chocolate chip cookies, for me, that smell is very powerful. I would come home from school many times and my mom would have cooked chocolate chip cookies. And for me, the smell of chocolate chip cookies means I love you. And so if I walk into a classroom and I smell chocolate chip cookies, I like that atmosphere because it connects to me. And so what does he see? What does he hear? What does he smell? And then what does he feel? And by feeling, that's taking in everything at the same time. Am I welcomed? Are other people, when they look at me, I'm new here, I'm walking in for the first time, do I feel like I can come in? Am I being greeted? One of the things that I want to encourage you to do as a leader is every student who walks through your door, look at them, immediately smile, call them by name if you know their name. If you don't, immediately move to them, get on their level, give them a high five because you've given them that physical touch, you're eye to eye with them, learn their name, engage them. Let kids, as they walk in, let them understand that they are important to you, that they are not just another child in the room, but they are valued, that they are special, and that they have a place in your room, that they are welcome and they're important, and that you want them to be there. This leads me to my next question. Once they're in the room, what happens next? One of the worst ways to make a first impression is to have kids show up in the room and no leaders be in the room. Or worse yet, have kids show up in a room and the lights aren't even turned on yet. Kids need to walk into a room, leaders are there, leaders are prepared, they're not setting up, they are there and they are focused on the kids as they enter. And as soon as the kids enter, they're able to engage the kids in an engagement activity. Now, we're going to talk about engagement activities in a different session, but right now let's talk about simply the idea that the moment a child walks in, there's something to do. Now, you want what they're doing, you want it to be engaging. Don't want it to be schoolwork. I actually was in a children's ministry once, and I walked into the classroom, and the kids were doing multiplication sheets. Now, I am all for kids understanding how to multiply and divide, but that is not the right time or place. You don't want a child to walk in the room, hey, I'm so glad you're here, we're going to have a great time today. Here's some homework. Sit down, let's get busy. You also don't want it to be, hey, come in. Now that you're here, I want to be able to hear a pin drop, shh, be quiet. No, kids need the freedom to talk. They need the freedom to have conversations. This is an incredible relationship building time. This is the time where you need to sit down with your kids and say, hey, last week, you told me that your grandma was sick. How's she doing? Last week you shared with me that such and such was going on in your life, and I've been praying for you, and I was just curious what was going on there. This is relationship building time. So you need an engagement activity that's fun, that's flexible enough where conversations can happen around it. So for example, let's say that you're teaching a lesson, and maybe you're teaching a lesson on fear. And so the children walk in, they sit down, and you immediately give them a lump of Play-Doh and ask them to make a face that looks scared. And so they're sitting there, they're working on their face, and do you see, now they're doing something fun, they're engaged, they're busy, their hands are going, but there's also the freedom in the middle of this to talk. Now I also want to encourage you, whatever engagement activity they are doing, if nobody new's walking in the room, sit down and do it with them. Now something else that we use, and I know not every church could do this, is we use videos. And the videos are simply videos of pictures we've taken during children's ministry events. We simply have those running with music in the background. And so it's another form of engagement. Kids are very visual. In fact, our kids are, not just our kids, our adults too. I mean, if you look at news programs, it's so visual. You've got the person talking about what's going on. You've got the bar at the bottom scrolling with other news things, and off to the side, it's information overload. And we're in a culture that engages not just your hands, but your eyes, your mind, your ears, everything, and many times all at the same time. Now, we don't want to have noise pollution in our rooms, but we do want them to be engaging. So music sets an atmosphere. So we put music on. We just put pictures with it. So that if a kid finishes his Play-Doh and he stops for a minute, he can look up, watch the pictures. It's engaging him in a different way because he's seeing events that maybe he missed. He's seeing what happened maybe last Sunday. And so he's looking at it, and he's being engaged in multiple different ways. Now, an easy way to create videos, it's very easy if you go to animoto.com. Now, that's animoto.com. Very easy. All you have to do is upload a song, upload some pictures. You can put some text in there. It does all the rest, and it comes out with this very professional-looking video that you can literally make in a matter of minutes. And so if you have the ability, if you have a TV in your room, and one of the things that I discourage is I really don't like kids coming into a classroom and just watching TV. I like for kids to learn through relationship, to be engaged through relationship. But video is a tool. And so in our ministry, we do use videos as kids are showing up, as kids are leaving. To make small points in the middle, we'll use a video to highlight or enhance a point. We do most of our teaching live. It's one-on-one, it's relational, it's engaging. But videos can be another tool that brings in an aspect that kids are used to and that they connect with very quickly. And so as they enter, that's another idea of something that you may want happening in your room. So the question is, how will your kids be engaged once they're there? As they enter, what's going to happen? When they get there, where are they going to sit? What are they going to do? Now that we're talking about sitting, let's talk about chairs. How you set up your chairs will also affect the atmosphere, and will also really connect to how you're going to teach. Do you want the kids to sit on the floor? Do you want the kids to sit in chairs? How do you want the chairs arranged? Do you want them in straight rows? Do you want them in a horseshoe? Do you want an aisle down the middle? Do you want them set up in a circle? Now, I use all of those different ways, but a lot of it depends on what I want to accomplish in my lesson that day. Now, if I'm teaching younger kids and I'm going to have them sit on the floor, many times I will give them a carpet square. And the reason for that is simply because it defines, this is my space. This is where I belong. This is my space. And it alleviates some of if you let a kindergartner sit on the floor, and it's very, very common that he will find a way to go from sitting to laying, from laying to rolling, and then suddenly he's rolling into the space where other kids are as well. It becomes a distraction. So giving them a boundary in a fun way, hey, choose your carpet square. Oh, you get the carpet square that is such and such. In a fun way, it allows them a boundary. A chair does the same thing. A chair is simply a boundary. It gives them their space. They have their area. It's easy for them to stay out of other people's areas, and easy for them to be comfortable inside their own. This is my space right here. And so chairs, If chairs are set up with straight rows facing directly forward, it's more of a classroom setting. It's a little bit more generic, a little bit more inhospitable. Now, not always. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There are many times where I'll use chairs set up in straight rows. A lot of times, though, I'll angle chairs because I want to create the focal point to be right in the middle. So if you sit where your kids sit, look, if they're looking straight ahead, what are they looking at? Now, if they're the last kid on the end of a row and the rows are set up straight, the chances are his chair is not facing him towards you. His chair is facing him toward the wall directly in front of him. So many times I will gently curve chairs, horseshoe chairs, or give them an angle that creates a focal point right where I want the main teaching to happen. Now, sometimes I'll set up chairs in a circle. Now, a circle is more for conversation. It's more for discussion group. You can do this in large group as well, but if you're going to teach in the middle of the circle, you've got to realize one of your distractions is going to be the kids on the opposite side of the circle. You're also going to have to realize that as you teach, you're going to have to turn in a circle so that you're continually connecting and making eye contact with all the kids in that circle. Now, there are times that I'll do that. Many times I'll teach in a circle setting when I'm leading a recreation lesson or a lesson that depends on some form of high activity. Then you also want to make sure that you have enough chairs, but not too many chairs. If you set up too many chairs, what's going to happen is your kids are going to space out, and especially if they don't go to the same school, or you'll have a clump of kids and they go to the same school, and then you'll have one child over here and another over there, and they're spaced out, and they become the outsiders. You want the chairs not too many, enough where the kids are in the same vicinity, and at the same time, you don't want too few, because if you have that guest walk in and he comes in late and he's already uncomfortable because he came in late, and he came in late because, his parents were talking outside to the greeters and it took them longer to get in, and now he's walking in and, oh no, there's no chair for him. You don't want to have to run and scramble to find a chair. You always want to make sure that you have that extra chair in the classroom or extra few chairs so that any latecomers, any new guest, immediately they're able to come in without a big deal being made and everybody turning around to see who's getting the chair because you had to stop teaching because now there's somebody in the room and they don't have a chair. It becomes a big distraction and very uncomfortable for a guest as well. And so your chair setup, it really is more important than what a lot of people give it. What direction are your chairs facing? Are they facing the direction that they're always facing? Now, kids need consistency, but sometimes kids need variety too. Sometimes it's good to have it a little different, to let them face a wall or an angle that they don't normally face. That's good. There's consistency, but there's variety there too. You want to also avoid many times facing the door, because if somebody comes to the door, then instead of them looking at you, they're going to be looking at what's happening behind you at the door or outside the window. I rarely ever face children toward a window simply because there's so much that can happen outside that window and you have no control over that whatsoever. And so be really careful what your setup is going to be. Your setup, how you set up the chairs, how you set up the tables, it's going to set the atmosphere not only for when they walk in, but for when you're teaching as well. Finally, is your class welcoming? Now, what I mean by this is not just is there an open chair, but the things in the room. Look at your room. Are there pictures in the room? If there are pictures, then make sure you change them often enough that if a newcomer comes and he's been there a month or 6 weeks, that his picture ends up there as well. Now, if you have cubbies in your room, make sure that they're not all assigned out that all the cubbies have names, and now you have a new student in your room, and there's no place for his name. And when we're talking about names, let's talk about attendance charts as well. Now, I've always been a fan of attendance charts, but in the last couple of years, I've really had a change of heart. I still like for kids to have the ability to see how much they've been there and when they've been there, but I really debate within myself how publicly that needs to be. Right now in our Sunday school classrooms, we've begun using journals. So every student comes in, and one of the ways that they're engaged is they go get their journal, or if they're new, they get a journal, and there's different activities to do inside that journal. And our older kids, they can actually keep a journal of what God's doing in their lives. They can actually keep a journal of prayer requests. It's engaging, but inside that is where their attendance chart is, instead of it being hung on the wall. wall. There were some kids that we had a few years ago, and they had made some statements about how uncomfortable the attendance chart made them feel because they wanted to be there, but their parents wouldn't bring them. But they would come, and as soon as they saw the attendance chart, it put a bad taste in their mouth, because all these other kids got to be there so much more and they couldn't be. Or they felt bad. They wanted to be there, but their mom and dad took them out of town or went to the lake instead. And it became almost, in some of their minds, a guilt trip, which was not the intention. I think our kids need to see how consistent or inconsistent they are, but I really debate about the importance of having it actually posted on the wall. Now, I'll leave that for you and your other leaders to figure out how you want to use that. But those are some recent thoughts for me, and thoughts that had been different. I'd always been a big fan of attendance charts. And in recent days, I've really begun to revisit how that needs to be. I do think it's important for kids' names to have a place somewhere in the room. But the problem with an attendance chart is, if a child comes once, do you add them? And if you do add them, and maybe they never show up again. Before long, you're on a new attendance chart, and then suddenly you've got 20 kids on these 2 or 3 attendance charts that never come. Well, how do you condense that? I mean, do you see the issues that come there? Because you don't want that kid to come and you go, well, I'm not putting you on the attendance chart because I'm not really sure you're coming back again. No. If you have a place where students' names go and a guest shows up, their name needs to go there. They need to have a way where they're immediately engaged, where it says, this is your place too. You belong here. Look, your picture's on the wall. The picture you drew today is hanging up. You know, your name is over here. Look, you've got a place on your cubby too. And so you have to evaluate the importance of, yes, we want every kid to feel like, this is my place, but also to make sure it doesn't exclude or make newcomers and guests feel uncomfortable, or even students that come inconsistently. So there are a few things that you need to take a look at and think through as you plan and design and decorate your room, and as you ask yourself, how welcoming is my room? So now let's recap for just a moment. A few things that we've talked about. We've talked about, the atmosphere. What do your kids see? What do your kids hear? What do they smell? What do they feel? How are the chairs set up? Is it welcoming? Are there enough chairs? Are there too many chairs? How do your kids sit? How are your kids engaged once they enter the classroom? As they enter, how are they welcomed? What do they do? And then we also, last of all, we talked about how welcoming is your class. Now, there's one last thought I want to leave you with. If you want to know what your kids think about your class, and this isn't just the atmosphere, but this is your teaching everything. If you want to know what your kids think about it, ask them. But realize kids are going to be very honest with you. So don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. And if you ask the question and you see that certain things are out of order, instead of choosing your preference, take a look at what is best and what's going to meet their needs best and what's going to help you to become the best teacher possible in meeting their needs, in connecting them to the truth of the gospel, even if perhaps it's not your greatest preference.